Prabhupada walked in the room and he just looked at the situation of the preparations and he stopped. He said, "What is this? Where are the fruits? Where are the flowers? I cannot believe this. He said, I think this initiation ceremony is a farce. I cannot bring the Lord of the universe into a place like this. Why have you not decorated nicely? What is this? What are these things?" There were stainless steel hotel pans for bathing the deities in. You know, the rectangular they call hotel pans. They were the best the devotees had to come up with, but Prabhupada was totally dissatisfied. Totally dissatisfied. He started to rage. He stood there for a long time chastising Nanda Kumara, chastising Shamsundar, chastising Akoyananda, one or the other, one after the other. Then he said, I am not going to do it. I do not think this is simply, I cannot do it. You have not done nicely. This is not, there should be flowers and fruit everywhere. Everything should be much, no, I cannot do it. I'm leaving. Then he stopped. And he kind of hesitated. Then he got up on the Vyasasana and said, "All right, I will do it, but I do not think this is very nice." And this was all right on TV. He didn't pay the slightest bit of it. He was shouting for, it must have gone on, I think it might have gone on for 10 minutes. He just dressed all three of them up and down one side and up and down the other. It was just incredible. And I was shaking. I was thinking, boy, I'm lucky that I wasn't in charge of any of the arrangements. Then he said, "All right." So there was a kirtan, and then he said, "All right, Revatinandan Maharaj, you do the fire sacrifice." Now Pradyumna was there, and I had assumed that he was going to do the fire sacrifice, because he always did them, right, when he was there. But I think maybe because it was Akoyananda's sannyas unexpectedly, unexpectedly I was called upon to do it. Now I'd already been doing some of these, both marriages and deity installation ceremonies in London, but I hadn't done one in months. However, I knew all the prayers and mantras. So I thought, well, I sat down to do it, right? I just had to start functioning. And at least luckily, I thought luckily I know very well the Mangalacharana prayer, so at least I can chant the mantras, and I knew the one about Oma Povitra Pavitro Va Sarva Vastam Gatopi Va Yaksmared Pundarikaksham Shabaya Bhyantara Suchi. So I started in, and as I started doing the Bande Ham Shri Guru Shri Juta, having everybody repeat it, every time I would break syllables in the words. Like, for example, where does one divide the one word that is Shri Varsabhanavi Devi Dayitayan Kripabdaye? It all shows as one word in the songbook. Where does that break up into syllables? You have to know Sanskrit in order to be able to properly divide it into smaller groups of their compound words. But Prabhupada had already told us in India not to spend time studying Sanskrit other than to learn it as we did classes. And so I wasn't a Sanskrit scholar. I was forbidden to do it, actually, because he wanted us to be preaching in India. So anyway, every time I would make a mistake, Prabhupada would interrupt me. And he would say, "No, it is not like that. It is like this." And he would show the correct division of the words into syllables. But I had to continue to keep on going, and every time I made a mistake, which were inevitable mistakes, because I did not know Sanskrit, Goravir Bhava Bhumes Thum is one word, right? Etc., right? So where to break it up into syllables? And every time I made a mistake, I got chastised. And the more he chastised me, the more nervous and upset I got. Because it was like all of a sudden I was on the firing line. And his mood was intense that afternoon. I've never seen him like that, personally, that angry, right? And so finally, in my confusion, I skipped over I got through to Namo Mahabharanaya, and I skipped it. And I started into Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu, and Prabhupada said, "No, you have forgotten Namo Mahabharanaya." "All right, I will finish these mantras." And then he concluded the mantra chanting, much to my relief, right? Then the rest of it went basically okay, right? Prabhupada had this sour look on his face most of the time, but then he gave Akoyananda his sannyas. Akoyananda was standing there. Besides taking sannyas, which is serious enough, he was also had just been chastised very heavily. And he was holding the danda, and his teeth were clenched, and he was shaking. So finally, when it was all over, and one more thing, you know, afterward, the mantras are chanted a second time the way Prabhupada did an initiation. While the fire is made, the mantras are chanted again. And then the ghee and grains are put with the shraddha, and the bananas are put, right? So while Prabhupada chanted the mantras, I was doing the fire, because I was sitting right there at the sand, right? So, so what happened is, as I was doing it, I started feeding sticks into the fire with my right hand and had the ladle in my left hand. And it was pouring ghee. And then as I held up the ladle, I realized, oops, it's supposed to be in my right hand. And I switched hands, and Prabhupada was looking at me as I did it, and he went like this. Because, again, I'm left-handed, right? And I had I was using the wrong hand to pour the ghee on the fire, and I had to switch it, and he was watching me do it. And he made this really disgusted look on his face. So finally, when that was over, he said, all right. He pointed at me, he said, begin kirtan. I started leading a kirtan. Prabhupada looked over to Koinana, who was still standing there like this. And Prabhupada looked at him, and for the first time in that afternoon, he smiled a little bit. And he went like this to a Koinana, looking at him, meaning dance. Get your body moving, you know, loosen up a little bit, right? He was pleased with his seriousness and also wanted him to get into the swing of the kirtan. It wasn't that serious, you know what I mean? Or he should enjoy Krishna consciousness also. I thought that was clear from his facial expression. It's the first time he smiled all day. Then he got, after it was over, the place totally packed. He got up and went to the back door to leave, and when he got to the back door, the car hadn't gotten there yet. And he had to stand in a little drizzle of rain for a few minutes, and the crowd was so packed in behind him that he couldn't even fit back inside. And he was just standing there like this in the rain. He got into the car, and he asked Nanda Kumar, so, you have brought my prasadam? Now, he was taking simpler prasadam by that time. And Nanda Kumar said, well, Prabhupada, I thought you would take your usual prasadam since it's not as rich. He said, no, this is a deity installation. I want Mahaprasadam. So Nanda Kumar, he said, go and get me a plate. So Nanda Kumar went back in, came out with a plate of Maha, and they drove Prabhupada off. And Nanda Kumar told me, a little later on in the afternoon, when they arrived at Prabhupada's apartment, the car stopped, Prabhupada's plate of prasadam fell off the back seat and landed face down on the floor of the back seat of the car, which one can simply assume was what the floor of a back seat of a car is usually like, not perfectly clean, right? And Nanda Kumar went, oh no, you know, to himself. And when Prabhupada went upstairs, he said, I was hoping Prabhupada would forget about his prasadam, but the first thing he said was, where's my prasadam? Bring me my prasadam. And he said, Prabhupada, it fell on the floor. Prabhupada said, bring it. And Nanda Kumar picked it off the floor, put it back on the plate, and brought it to him. He said, Prabhupada ate the whole plate. Right? Again, it probably had dirt and whatnot in it, and Prabhupada ate it all anyway, because it was prasadam.
I don't remember what it was that I did, but there was some foolish thing I did. And Prabhupada looked at me, you know. There was something about, I had forgotten something. And so I said, Prabhupada, I just can't remember. He said, yes, you cannot remember. He said, because there is nothing inside there to be able to remember with. He said, simply zero. Just zero. Whew. I thought, this is the final thing after all these years. There's nothing in there, you know. I said, oh, boy. It's a heavy chastisement.
I went through this really difficult bout of illness. Then I came back, I went to Delhi and I got better, and we traveled some more, and I ended up back in Calcutta like maybe 2 years later or something with hepatitis. And I wasn't getting well. I was taking Ayurveda, and I wasn't getting well. And Prabhupada finally said to me, I remember I was explaining to him, because when he came back, he had been away, and then he came back and he said, you are not getting any better. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm taking Ayurveda. And he said, do not take Ayurveda. He said, Ayurveda is for preventative medicine. He said, "You are now very sick. You should go You should go to a regular doctor, and take regular medicine." So he thought Ayurveda was preventative, not curative. And I mean, after all, he was a pharmacist prior to becoming a sannyasi.